Some people call this a midlife crisis, but I'm on the dumb phone at the moment.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so if we just over there, for you to start thinking, oh no, I haven't made it, I'm actually a bit of a failure.
Yeah.
That early in life, like I said, that could either derail you and you'd be like, I'm no good at anything. We can't keep putting our entire lives and all our hopes and aspirations into this one dream. When it doesn't go that way, we lose a friend or we lose who we used to know. So what we did start talking about was, that side of things where the fear of failure was because we felt we needed to be that person for everyone. If we were to make policy or if we were to do a physical activity program that was for sedentary people across all ages in the Cook Islands, what would that look like? And you're right, when we use mental health, we immediately think illness, whereas mental health is a broad term for anything that is going on with how your ability to process and think. It has to get very, very, very bad, and this is like most health conditions that they're going to be. That's meaning that it's pretty much going under the radar the entire time until it gets to a point where either one, there's an event, or two, it's so close to an event that they need immediate help. Yeah. And that's across the board for a lot of health conditions.
It is with great pleasure to welcome Dr. Troy Ruhe, who is a research fellow. Troy is a self-proclaimed lifetime learner, has succeeded in several environments, not only with his mahi, but excelling in sports, including CrossFit and rugby, and a few others as well. Troy gets stuck into helping many of the Pacific Island community and has also hosted his own podcast, the Sick As Podcast, which I would highly recommend. In November 2023, Troy received the Tofa Saili Pacific Early Career Award and is hoping to help research the health of his Pacifica and Māori people. Troy, a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Yeah, cheers.
Hey, just quickly before we get into it, I noticed you came in and you said to me about an hour ago that you were coming into the gym early to look swole. So yeah, you're looking pretty good.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's to make sure that I'm feeling all right. Like when we did the vlog that we did before, that's my thing that starts anything off. If there's something that I've got a little bit of nerves about, even though I shouldn't, because it's comfortable to be here, but it's just the one thing that I know I can get in, sit it out, and then look a little bit of extra swole as well on top of that.
Yeah, you're looking good. Jandal's in here.
Cheers,
it's a unique look. And yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, we filmed a vlog with Troy about 2 or 3 months ago, and it just gave us a little bit of an insight into your life and what you do for your mahi and everything like that, and some of your philosophies as well, which we'll dive into shortly. But first, start off where it all began. Where are you from, and how did you manage to get all the way down here to Dunedin?
It's a great question, and something that almost changes every time I have to answer it, because there's more, like when you start answering it one time, you just forget a huge chunk because of the context that you're trying to answer it from. But yeah, I'm a boy from the Cook Islands. There's an island in the Cook Islands called Mauke, or Akatoko Manawa, so those are the two names for it. It's an island with, I'd say, a population of about 200 at the moment. So it's very, very small. But my family now live on Rarotonga, the main island. So when people are talking about going to the Cook Islands, they're probably thinking about Rarotonga. So I'm between here and there. But then when our family moved to New Zealand, they moved to a nice, pretty much the centre of the world, Porirua, which is in Wellington. So Cannons Creek, Porirua. And then from there, I did all my high schooling in Wellington. And then after school, so I don't know if they still do it, but in NCEA you had your exams, and then you also had the scholarship exams that you could do on top of that to get a little bit of coin after. And I did the physical education scholarship. Well, I did the exam for that, and I wasn't too sure what I was going to do after school. It was one of those things where I was like, I could do this, but we'll dive into it soon. But I was playing sport, and at that time, it was kind of like, sport. I got to crack it in sport. That's where I'm going. But then the scholarship came through, and I actually got that, which was kind of one of the first times I showed myself that, you can actually be. You're actually kind of smart too. And it wasn't just my family saying it to me, because they always go, yeah, you're a smart boy, and my teachers. But this was actually going up against all the other people in the country, the same age as me, going for the same scholarship, and I was one of those people to get that. So yeah, that's how it came down to here, because we were told at the time that Otago was, if you want to do sport and exercise science, Otago's the place to go. And then that's how I ended up here, and that was Over a decade ago now. So yeah, it just kept growing and kept growing and kept growing.
So from the islands to go to, why Porirua?
Porirua was a hotspot.
Okay.
I think if you look at the demographic of the country, so we obviously have a huge Pacific population in Auckland, mostly because it is the centre point of all international travel into the country. And then people will talk about the 16th island of the Cook Islands, so there's 15 islands that make up the Cook Islands. The 16th, arguably, some people will say Tokoroa, or they'll say Porirua. So those places are, where a lot of the Pacific or the Cook Islands communities actually reside. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So growing up in Porirua with sport and whatnot, what was your dream back then? Was it to be a rugby player, to crack maybe the All Blacks one day?
Well, just like all your friends, and growing up in the era, actually like pretty much side by side in the academy with Ari Savia, who he had his brother, he had people he could look to going through the system, and then I could kind of like see, if that's one way that we can go, I'm all in on this as well. So obviously being an All Black, I remember I was about 11, and when you get into academy, the first thing they teach you is goal setting. And for that year, so they'll teach you like your SMART goals, and you have your short term, your long term, but we started at the long term, and it was for the World Cup just gone. I wanted to be the captain of that squad, which was probably pushing it a bit. Well, Ari did it, but that was where I wanted to get to. And coming back was for my under 12 squad at the time. I want to captain that team too. And every team that I'm in from there, I'm the captain of that team. So like rising to leadership was my goal. But rugby was the sport that I focused on mainly from then. And then it kind of shifted around my mid-teens. Yeah.
Now, was that when you started getting into skateboarding? Because you've said prior that you're into skateboarding now. I must admit, I don't want to be like stereotypical or anything like that, but when you told me that a couple of months ago, I was very surprised that you were a skateboarder.
It's not a brother sport.
It's not a brother sport.
No. I get what you mean.
So yeah, like how did that all come about?
Yeah. Well, so the biggest thing is when you're in Wellington and you're a kid who everything's quite expensive in terms of traveling around the city. So skateboards were actually our transport. So we would just have whatever skateboard we could get, and then we just started seeing like a lot of people, like the Wellington skate park, the Schaefer's skate park, the Waitangi Park now, that was in its process of becoming developed and a bit more safe, because kind of skateboarding at that time, and I think I said it in the vlog too, was like this bad boy sport, and the only people doing it were like you're probably also affiliated with some sort of drug scheme, or you just don't care about the world at all. So it's like I'm a rebel. But yeah, as that started to become a safe space, like actually a safe place for parents to leave their children, that then became, if our parents were going to go do something or we needed to kill some time, just take the skateboard, ride around, and we're in this place. It's kind of like a playground. It's a kindergarten, really, but with no supervision. And then when you try your first couple of tricks and you don't get it and you suck, it drives people two ways. One way, it's like, this isn't my thing, or the other way where you're like, stuff this board, I'm going to own it. So that was where we were, and I was probably 9 when I first rode my first skateboard, and I competed when I was 13. 13 was my first competition.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sort of blows my mind that you managed to do that at such a young age. Moving sort of forward into your gym sort of journey. Yep. Obviously, we've spoken about that. Looking quite swollen and whatnot. But you've competed in CrossFit. When did that sort of desire for you come across? Yeah. And what did you achieve in that space? Were there any goals that you had in that space that you wanted to succeed in? For sure. So I think when you look at most CrossFit athletes, or at least a lot of the ones that I'm in circles with or talking with, they were people who had competed most of the times in another sport, and then because of the limited access that people can have to continue competing in that sport, or not saying past their prime, but like just getting to that point where they need something that's still a stimulus in terms of competition. And you have, people are going to say you compete with yourself every single day, but there are actual
annual competitions that are held in CrossFit, which anyone who loves going to the gym but also needs something to strive for, that's kind of where people would go. It's either that, or recently I've just seen people getting into ultras and stuff, but like it's that sort of above the bar, not just your everyday I'm going to the gym to train, I'm actually going to the gym to train for something. So that's when CrossFit came in, and that would have been when I was just coming out of rugby for the first time, where I realized like actually, and it's weird now thinking about it because I was probably early 20s, but in rugby speak and those sorts of circles, what's considered old are people who haven't quite cracked it by the time you're still early 20s, which you're still a baby. For you to start thinking, oh no, I haven't made it, I'm actually a bit of a failure, that early in life, like I said, that could either derail you and you'd be like, I'm no good at anything, or you can just see like, where can I push these, what avenues can I actually push into? And CrossFit was so accessible because it is open to anyone, but depending on where you want to go with it, there are so many competitions through the calendar year, which can lead to, ultimately, I think at the time they had, what are those the CrossFit documentaries on Netflix at the time, Fittest on Earth. Anyone watched that and like, I'm going to the games. So it was open to the community, and I think that's what I loved about it, was that it was something that we could do worldwide and be part of a worldwide community.
Just going back on that phase where you transitioned from rugby into CrossFit, was there any disappointment in your mind when you had that feeling of like, I haven't cracked it yet, when you're 21, 22, whatever, especially going back to what you said before around leadership? I need to be the captain of this rugby team. I'm seeing Artie Savia, I'm seeing Julian Savia, all these guys that I've gone to school with, crack it. Was there any disappointment for you when you got to that age?
Now, this is a big revelation, or a big thing that I really thought about only recently too, because that probably happened, almost a decade ago now. Which it's, hindsight's beautiful. And if I could have told myself this at that time, I think I would have progressed into other things a lot faster, with less resentment for the system, for myself, for all my support systems and whatnot. But the main thing was, I think at that time, I was more in the camp of having more fear of failure than I did for striving to succeed. Where if I did have that, I will just show up and keep pushing until I make it, then I think I would have, just been like, okay, I emptied the tank. But at the time, I also had like niggling injuries, a couple of concussions, and at that time, I was like, well, I do have that knee, so maybe, if I don't make it, it's because like I always had something to fall back on, and I think that's what gave me some sort of reprieve at the time. But now thinking about it, there was a couple years after, so in terms of the disappointment, was that I really feel like I didn't actually give my all. So it wasn't that I was disappointed that I didn't make it. I think I was more disappointed in my effort, that I didn't give everything I should have. But then at the same time, where I ended up, I was stoked with that. So that was kind of a bit of a balancing thing internally that I had to go through.
Often what comes from that is like an acknowledgement, first of all, that it's like, oh man, because essentially what it sounds like is excuses. I have this kind of excuse, and that's probably why I didn't make the team. But when you move into another sport, to acknowledge that is go, oh, I don't want to repeat the same thing. I do have this, but I'm not going to let that stop me from moving. And seems like that's what you've kind of learnt and sort of moved on.
Absolutely.
When you've gone into your other sports.
And when people say, empty the tank, it's hard to know what that is until you've either done it, or you realise you didn't do it when you should have.
It's one or two things, It's like flipping the coin. And not the resentment, but the denial, because there's been a few sports that I've done and I've gone, oh man, same thing. I think I could have gone here, but I just didn't empty the tank at the time. And that's something that you kind of can't take back.
For sure.
/ when you move forward, it's like next sport, I'm all in. Or next thing that I do, I'm all in.
100%.
Do you think that's like a cultural thing, to look at the fear, to look at the failure?
I have had a lot of discussions about this with my friends. So we do get together often and talk about this sort of stuff, which is actually quite different now, because it used to be something that we all just held in. But because of the amount of friends that we were just, we're just going off the rails because of this stuff, we're like, we need to actually start getting to the bottom of this, because it is not we can't keep putting our entire lives and all our hopes and aspirations into this one dream.
thing. Yeah.
When it doesn't go that way, we lose a friend or we lose who we used to know. So what we did start talking about was, that side of things, where the fear of failure was because we felt we needed to be that person for everyone. And that our families, they sacrificed a lot. And that's in a lot of spheres as well. So like they come down to uni, for example, they're going to be a doctor. And then they don't make med, and it's like, how am I going to tell my family? But it's like, he's going to be an All Black. And it's like, I didn't even make academy. How am I meant to like carry my head around my family or my community that supported me? So
it's interesting. It's a real thing, eh?
Oh,
it's
yeah,
a real
man.
thing. That I don't know if many other cultures have, or I've got no doubt that there's expectation, but it was a little bit the same for me when I was growing up. The expectation was, oh man, he's good at this, he's incredible at this, he's the first one to ever do this. I was like, oh, it's too much now. I want to come up, I want to come down here, and kind of live my own life, or start living a life that kind of made sense to me as opposed to made sense to what everybody else wanted for me was tough.
For sure.
Tough.
I think the difficulty with that as well, like even just going into research, which I'm sure we'll get to, is no one in my family had done research before. No one in my community had done research before. So it just looked like, oh, you didn't quite crack it, so now you're doing this weird side thing. But like, it was actually something I was genuinely passionate about. But because it hadn't been a road that many people had gone before, they're just like,
it's different, huh? When it's different, it's like, okay.
What is I guess your main mission as a researcher currently? Because you have done a lot of work over the years, and obviously, as I said at the opening, that you obviously helping a lot of the Pacifica and Māori community. So what is your focus at the moment, and what are you trying to do?
So it's that journey I came through. It's actually an interesting one. I came through into the School of Phys Ed down at the University of Otago, and at that time, well, I'll ask you to. If you're going to go study PE, what are you going to become?
PE teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
Teacher.
So that's all I had in mind, was that's all you can do. So I was like, yes, cool. I will teach the art of, being healthy through physical activity by teaching in schools. Until my first year of, we went through all the biology, all the physiology, and I was like, holy moly, hang on. You can do all this? And it's something that was also another thing difficult to tell my family, is that I was doing PE, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, you can come teach at our local schools and stuff. I was like, no, I'm not going to be a teacher. So that was just what people don't understand. And then when I went through, I saw that it was actually a shout out to a glucose transporter named Glut4, because one of my big things was about combating non-communicable disease, and one of the big ones being diabetes. And what we found, or what I have found through a lot of research, is that physical activity in any form, like just doing some sort of exercise, when it moves the muscle, we have an insulin independent, so it doesn't need insulin to be able to push this glucose transporter to the cell membrane. So that glucose transporter comes up, and then glucose that's in the blood will attach to that and then take it into the cell. What we found was that if you are moving muscle and just going through exercise, per se, then you can, without insulin or without the beta cells of your pancreas working well, you can still take that glucose out of your body. I learnt that as an 18-year-old, and that was just like, whoa, holy, that just changed my whole perspective on exercise, because exercise was to be swole, to be fast, to be fit and the strongest person ever. I never saw it as something that actually we can just by moving a little bit, it doesn't always have to be PBs all the time, by just moving and getting out, we can totally 360 or 180 someone's life who has never moved before, but just with that little bit of movement can actually do something positive for their physiology. So that's where it all went.
Yeah, so that's the kind of catalyst for you to look at the research.
And then so from that, it was understanding psychology of people wanting to be more physically active, and which is something that you've probably done heaps of, to start a gym to get more people in. There's the consumer side of things, but also moving away from the consumer side, and how is it that we actually change these people's lives. So that was the behavioural psychology, and then that kind of came in to form my PhD, which was, if we were to make policy, or if we were to do a physical activity program that was for sedentary people across all ages in the Cook Islands, what would that look like? So I just spent a good couple of years just chatting with people to find, where's that common ground between what we know in the science, in terms of the physiology and all the science behind that, and then the other side, which is the social side, which I think in physical activity, exercise spaces, sports science spaces, I think we forget that these are humans with lives and that dynamic, because we've got the best science ever. We're like, okay, but we don't live in a petri dish. We don't live with all of these like constraints that don't exist. So it was, how do we put that all together? So that was the start of my research career.
So was that when you were you worked alongside the Cook Islands Ministry of Health and whatnot? Yeah. So how did that go? Like, was there a program that was implemented there? And
yes, so that's exactly how it happened. Is because I do go back and forth between here and the Cook Islands often. Yeah. I was working for the health promotion unit in the Cook Islands for the Cook Islands Ministry of Health. And that was also a bit of an eye-opener because, when you get a job, I think all these people who come out of uni just assume the rest of your world is like uni, where you can just like show up and like, oh yeah, they'll tell me what to do.
This is what's going to happen.
Yeah. But I got there and I was like, all right, sweet. So what's the plan? They're like, you got it? And I was like, got what? And they're like, yeah, what are we going to do? And I was like, oh, so right, that's right. I'm the expert now. So it's actually something that I think I was very, very grateful for to have that. But it's another part of my life where if I had just been like, I don't have this, that's my whole career just gone down because I didn't believe or have the self-efficacy to be able to carry that out. So there was that, which then got me working with the WHO on a project with the WHO across all of the Pacific region. So looking at physical activity, so all of the resources that come in to get more people more physically active. If it was going to be used in any of the Pacific nations, then I had to go and improve it, make sure say this instead of this, and then do consultations with different groups. And then I because of that sort of stuff where I was at the policy level, I then moved into big data and all that stuff later. But we can...
Do you enjoy that?
What's that?
Do you enjoy that?
The policy side of things?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Oh, no. But I see now where I enjoy it when I can see the meeting point between the implementation and putting it together, because I am very much a humble floor worker. I would rather do that all day, every day. But when there is no one who is bridging that gap between all the policies that are being made and all the policies being implemented at the floor level, that's when I just be like, there's no point us working so hard down here because it's just not even... Yeah. So moving into that way was kind of a natural progression.
Yeah. It's interesting how when you talked about your sporting career and the goal being a leader or the captain, it's essentially sort of seems to be that with the research now. I was like, well, nobody else is stepping up, so I'm going to go into that role, that leadership role. And do you find it hard not to do something?
Now that is, I think I just had that conversation, it was either this morning or yesterday, where I said no to a bunch of teaching that I'd usually do. And the person who asked me the favour actually said, good on you. Yep. And I think that's the first time I've been praised for saying no. Which is it doesn't happen often. No. But the leadership thing, and that was something that I loved about coming to here in this gym, is that anywhere I go, it's always oh, Troy's here. He's got this, so he can maybe coach a couple classes, blah, 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 blah. And then you become this guy who can't just walk in incognito and get your stuff done. This is my escape. Yep. I love coming here and just being they're holding it down, they've got their own thing. Cool, I can just come in and be me. Yep. It is difficult to say no, but at the same time, it's one of those things where I have to start weighing up now. It's okay, the fulfillment though, is that actually going to be worth it, or worth being as tired as I am? Yep. Or
You have some interesting philosophies. I must admit, when we did do that vlog a couple of months ago on our YouTube channel, one of the things that you did say to me was training your body to gather your food, which I found I just hadn't heard something like that before, especially when I was at the gym and training. I was like, oh my gosh, I've not heard something like this before. So I sort of want to dive into that. How do you get to that mindset and to that thought process of I need to train to gather food, or even the fact that you even said, I pre-train before I come to the gym, which is, like doing all these things before you go to the gym, so then you're in here for like 45 minutes. It's very particular, it's a very different mindset that I haven't come across before. So yeah, let's sort of get into that sort of side of things.
Sure, yeah. So that is, what that comes from your family being brutally honest with you. So I was obsessed with the gym because I was, just your regular teenager and we've got them in the gym and you see them everywhere where we just want to be swole. And like you want to get huge because you think that's what's going to solve your problems. I was like, well, it doesn't matter that I have low self-efficacy. Look at my bench press, like all that sort of stuff. But like that's where I felt I could control that part of my life. It's like, okay, I'm in control of this. And then over time, you just have your family and you go back. You go do stuff where you're lifting or you're doing a hard day of work. So like doing our tuddle work, and it's just like your family being brutally honest and saying, all that muscle for what?
Yeah.
And it's just like you've got no function, no nothing like that. So that's because that's a lot of the work that we do, as well as when it actually all changed when my uncle was, we were talking about surfing and just being out there, like, are there good waves here? Are there good waves there? And he's like, how long do you go out there for? You're like, 3 hours. And it's like, do you come back with any food? Yeah. And I was like, no. And he's like, what a waste of time. Why are you out there for that long? So it's that sort of mindset as well. And, not to sound like Liver King or all of that sort, where they're going back to primal. But when I do think about being a functional human, it's someone who is functional, like to be able to engage in activities that will benefit communities and benefit yourself as well. Because when you're going to get food, like not from the supermarket, and you're actually going out and being part of that process, like the circle of life process, you then appreciate your food as well. So all of that comes together so you're engaging in activities that allow you to be grateful for the food that you're about to consume, but also so that you can provide. So that's kind of where that all comes in. And the pre-training before the gym is just because, I used to spend maybe close to 2 hours, and I used to celebrate that I was in the gym for 2 hours today. But now I'm in the time where I just want to be in there, do what I need to do, and then get out so that I can do, to me, what is the important stuff. Mm.
Yeah, I think what I've found with talking to a lot of people in this gym is that they've moved away from that whole spending 2 hours in the gym, the bro lifting, all that sort of side of things, and they're more focused on that sort of physical side and the mental side of training, which it probably hasn't been that way previously, and I'm sure Phil would know that as well with his time in gyms, is that people go to the gym physically to look good, to feel good, to look good on the outside, but it wasn't the mental side of things. And I think that the training of people and how they adapt has definitely changed.
Yeah, I think that demand for you, the person, the self, is always there. For every member that comes in / when they come into the doors, it's like, it's just about me now. And nobody really cares that I have the skill and I have that. Actually, they don't even know, so they're not going to hit me up. I can just do what I want to do. Yep. So I think that's still something that happens in the gym. What we've noticed in the last 4 or 5 years is people that walk through the doors now are very deliberate about what they want to do. They're pretty clear in their minds, as opposed to, I've got a gym membership, so I better use it. And they'll use it once or twice. Like here we have, there's 90% of our members actually use the gym 3 to 4 times a week. It's awesome. That's why we own a gym. It's like, I don't want people to have a gym membership and sit at home. I want people to come in here and be really comfortable in the space. And when they walk through here, what we've really noticed is it's really deliberate. They know exactly what they're doing. They know how they're doing it. They know why they're doing it. And it's mostly for the mental side of things.
And I think that's something that, just before we go on, that I've challenged a couple of people on this, because we are people in the physical activity space, and we want people to be more physically active more often because we understand the benefits that are beyond the physical. But a lot of the statistics that are used are gym memberships rising while the amount of obesity and and I'm like, okay, that's a correlation. They are associated with one another, but I can tell you that the gym memberships and the actual care that goes into each of those gym memberships is not the same, because the high proportion of these are going to be people who are selling a gym membership to follow the Planet Fitness model, where it's like, how many people can we get to not use the gym.
Correct.
And we have a weekly, so to hear that stat of over 90% coming regularly, that just shows that...
It might be 80, but it's high.
Around over half, over 3/4 of the community actually using it, just shows that when we keep using statistics like that, all we're doing is driving people away from this narrative that physical activity is actually beneficial, because we're just only looking at one variable, and that's that people are more physically active, which they're not. Gym memberships does not equate to people being more physically active. And then, the rising of obesity, which we have way more access to everything in the world now. So there's also that component as well. But hearing that is awesome.
Hey man, if we could go back a step. So earlier you kind of talked about being in the gym and having a big body and having a body that moves, and then you go back home to the islands and then you start working and you're like, oh man, I only lasted half an hour, everyone's still working, and kind of getting a little bit of crap about it from your family. It's very much how we were sort of brought up, like we never went to the grocery store to go get groceries. And I'm thankful that my children, who are now grown, had a life or were growing up where we just went to the grocery store and got food. Do you think we've lost a little bit with the whole appreciation for actually where food comes from? It doesn't come from the grocery store. It comes from somebody's bloody hard work. And if you don't do it properly, then you don't eat properly.
For sure.
Do you think we've lost a bit of that?
I do think so, and I think that connection to food, like when you, like I said, when you engage in the circle of life, and whether that's vegetables or whether that's your meat that you're getting, and when you've been part of that process, you realize, how much work has gone into it. And this actually reminds me of a story. I think I was back maybe like a month ago, back in the Cook Islands, and we have this valley that you go up, and it's a roofless valley, and we pretty much, the like tsunami bars where you put they're just wobbly. So we chopped down some branches and we tied like kiko or the coconut like flats to the ends, and pretty much had a bunch of bananas at the front and the back and had them on both shoulders. And that took us, so just for, maybe that'll feed 50-ish people, it's a couple of bananas and people don't finish the whole banana. But all we're doing is saying, like, I still got a sore back having to walk this down. I fell into the river twice, like all of that, and actually explaining the process of how that food got from the tree to where you're eating it now changes the appreciation for it. And I think you start thinking about all the nutrients that go into it and who it is. And so I think that part of it, and even I don't know if there's any science on this whatsoever, but when you're eating food that you had a hand in making, you just take your time with it. You're not being like, just scoff it all because you're like, it's just food. You're just like, I remember when I put this in 9 months ago. Yeah.
No, that's cool. Going around, when you were in here and I was talking to you a few months ago, you talked about mental health. What have you seen sort of in the Pacific Island and Māori circles? Maybe it is with your research, or maybe it is with mental health. Because at the moment, I feel like mental health it's got a lot of negative connotations. For
sure, yeah.
And I've sort of seen that over the last 4 or 5 years. It's become such a big word here in Aotearoa. Like it is huge. So I want to sort of get your thoughts on that, because I didn't really think about it being a negative connotation, and I've definitely come across the side of if people keep talking about mental health, I think it just pushes, it is very negative. Whereas I think if people weren't talking about it before, because still rates of suicide and all that sort of stuff is still really high because of, I think, maybe people talking about it. But does it have a negative connotation? And what have you sort of seen in the Māori and Pacific Island community that maybe needs changing or
and that's, I think it was the end of last year or start of last year, and we're still working on it now, but I'm doing some mental health work in Pacific families and children, and you're right, and when we use mental health we immediately think illness, whereas mental health is a broad term for anything that is going on with how your ability to process and think. So I think that's already, when we're talking about mental health and people bolstering mental health, I think we're still not on the strengths-based side of things, where it's like, it's good for your mental health, and we're like, to stop you from having disease. And it's like, or just helping you to enjoy life as it is. A lot of the things, especially I can talk a lot about the Pacific data that's out there, is that it has to get very, very, very bad, and this is like most health conditions that they're going to be. It's almost to the point, so they're presenting at lower amounts, but the severity of the presentation is a lot higher when compared to non-Māori, non-Pacific populations. So that's meaning that it's pretty much going under the radar the entire time until it gets to a point where either one, there's an event, or two, it's so close to an event that they need immediate help. Yeah. And that's across the board for a lot of health conditions. Yeah. And I don't know if that's a cultural thing, like we're still trying to get our heads around it. Is that a cultural thing? Is it that services aren't responsive enough? But yeah, it's one of those things where, because if we are talking about it and we frame it, there is that stigmatization that, okay, well, I can't have a mental health issue because, that's for crazy people. And that's still a narrative that comes out a lot, and why people don't seek that help. But also it's just, will I let my family down because does this reflect poorly on them? Does this mean they didn't raise me right? Does this mean, there's something wrong with me or my community as well? So I think, it's a lot to do with the entire community, not just that individual, because I think when we think about our own health, we do think about who we are when we wake up and go to sleep, but we don't think about who it is that we actually interact with day to day, and those people also have us in their thoughts as well. So it's more communal than just that individual. Yeah.
It's the embarrassment, eh? A lot of the time it's the embarrassment. It's the whole, also, I don't want to annoy anybody. So I've had 2 grandparents pass away with exactly the same thing. It was like, man, they just sort of masked a lot of things that were going on. All of a sudden it's like, oh, well, man, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Go to the doctors. It's too late. The cancer is too far gone. Should have come to us about a year and a half ago and we could have solved it.
Absolutely.
That's a really noticeable thing. I'm like, even with my parents, I'm like, man, just do it regularly. Oh, I don't need to. I don't want to annoy anyone. I was like, man, you're not annoying anyone. It's what you should do every 6 months is go and get checked up.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a massive mindset that sort of needs to shift, and get away from those 2 things is what I've noticed. The embarrassment of, I don't want to and then I don't want to annoy anybody or put anybody else out.
For sure.
By telling them.
Yeah. And I think even the mindset's probably changed a lot in gyms as well. Like, people used to be embarrassed to go to the gym or be seen in the gym, and it's because like, oh, I'm doing something for myself, and it's like that was considered selfish. And it's like, wait, what? You're at the gym? Like, oh, do you want to be a bodybuilder? Like, that was kind of the mindset around it. But now I think it's getting to a point where we can, things that are accepted to everyone first. So going to the gym has now kind of less culty and more of an accepted norm. So once we slowly get things into like, okay, everyone's like Crocs made a revival and now you can wear them. But it's only if the multitude agree or like come to consensus that, yes, okay, it can go now. Yeah, so that sort of thing.
Yeah. Mate, so going back to your research, because I did read something about you and one of the awards that you'd won, and it had a lot to do with the big data, and the big data sort of showing this. But then how you take that big data and then make it relative to a community. And so, like sort of going back to what you just said then, it's like, well, there are answers, but do you think the answers are different for different communities
100%.
/ different cultures?
100%,
And is that where we're missing?
I think that's something that is if we use the example of this gym, and your numbers that are going up versus what the nation is seeing or what the world is seeing in terms of the correlation between gym memberships and the rates of obesity going up. So if you were to look at that, you would say, okay, people being more physically active is actually leading to people having higher obesity, which means physical activity is not important. However, it misses the context of those people who have that gym membership. What is the quality of care that they're getting? How much are they actually interacting with the gym? So that's like all this data that we do have misses a lot of context. And one of the issues that we are finding a lot in research now is that media don't care about the nuance of all your data. So we will have pretty much the most of the discussion is limitations. Is we have said this because, like, give the terminology, but we can only understand it within the confines of X, Y, Z. But they will take the one sentence that just says, like, it's sensational. Like, oh, if you do 10 minutes of physical activity, you can get rid of diabetes, and it's like,
Yeah.
within these constraints, that is kind of true, but we can't just go out and say that stuff like that. But yeah, my whole thing is around contextualizing data, because for the longest time, the narrative, the stories around Māori data and Pacific data have just kind of led to communities who don't care about their health. So if these are the statistics, that must mean that they just don't care.
Yeah.
But it's like, actually, there are so many underlying factors that lead to someone getting a diagnosis or someone actually showing up to some sort of service. Yeah, so that's my whole job is taking that data and then merging it with community leaders or health providers and being like, if you were to look at this, what are some of the factors or underlying factors for this sort of trend? And then just trying to put that out to the mainstream.
So how do you get that message out there in terms of what you've just said around the media and them taking one sentence out of a 3-page document, and then also you sort of touched on it around getting that to the right people in those communities. How do you get that message out there?
Yep, so that's the thing, is we won't talk to any media unless we've had all the okays from the right people. I think it's another meeting point where, to be a researcher, you're judged based on your ability to output articles. So there's a bit of a time sensitivity to it, but one thing that I stay true to is that I won't do it until it is the right time, which bites you on the ass sometimes because you don't quite meet deadlines. But I'm like, my own deadline is actually what's going to protect and the integrity of everything that we're putting out there. But one is, you do have people that you trust, you have news outlets that you trust. But then eventually where you'd want to get to is that you actually own the intellectual property of everything, so you can start putting out your own message. Similar to what you're doing here. Is you can control your narrative.
So can you do that?
Absolutely.
You can?
Absolutely. It can be done. It's hard. It is really, really hard, and it's hard to get traction. But at the end of the day, some of the times you just need the key people involved. And if those people are on board and those people believe, it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing or thinking, because you've got the key players in your team.
Yeah, because I think
interesting.
Yeah, because I see in the age that we are at the moment, everyone's doing their own thing, and like I see, like I scroll on my news feeds and I'm seeing like guys around like mortgage advisors, financial advisors, hot topics in the market right now, because that's what people sort of my age or our age, that's all they're talking about. They're talking about the stock market, mortgages, whatever, financial sort of side of things. And they are experts, which I may trust that they are. I haven't done any research on these people that they are experts. But what I'm not seeing is, as we said before, that you'll go into the media with this 3-page document, they're taking one thing out of it, and then a lot of people are believing that media source because it's a reputable media source, right? But there's no one like yourself that's going out there and being like, this is what has actually been said on your own sort of platform. Is that going to happen with you one day? Are you going to look to do that?
Hopefully. So this actually comes back to funny stories. Like, when you get memories on Facebook that come up and you're just like, oh, who was I? But that was... like, I think a big thing is being able to battle not misinformation, but not full information with better information. I was an absolute crusader for like all these quick fix schemes and stuff coming out, and instead of me just being like, okay, the evidence suggests blah 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 blah, I just go in on that person, and I was like, oh, I just had no grace whatsoever, because it used to make me so mad that people who weren't technically experts were going out and saying this, but could also have just such a huge following. And I don't know if that was jealousy because I wanted that following, just like, there are so many people who are going to follow this advice. And now it's at the point where I'm just like, well, yeah, okay, people are going to see this news anyway, and we do have a lot of people who, understand that this is for clickbait, and they do understand the way that the media works, but there are going to be people who just see it, take it as truth. So yeah, hopefully we can actually get it to a format, and it's also understanding the format, because we can have discussions like this, but people tune in and out to the stuff that they want. So trying to find what medium is also going to be best for whoever it is you're trying to get that research out to.
I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's a journey too, that you sort of take in your life as like Because I'm the same actually. This is about 4 months ago. There was something that bounced up on Facebook from 10 years ago. I'm like, who was that guy? He thought he knew everything. Yeah. And there's a humbleness as you age. You know, I think you become a bit more balanced or a bit more understanding to other ways of doing things and that type of stuff.
Yeah. Which actually that comes back to the balance thing that you're talking about. Like all my engagement in different sports, I think you get to a point where, because when you're in a sport, you're like, there is no better. This is the only sport for the rest of my life. When you get to a point where you just I'm just taking all the best parts of all the different ones, because you understand that there are limitations to everything that you do, which I think I found when I was just I like doing this, but it misses out on this aspect. And I like doing this, but it misses out on this aspect. And that's why when you see people training now, it's just a widespread.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and I think the thing to look out for now is someone who says this is the only way. It's probably not the only way, and that's probably the one to stay away from. Anything that's going to be fast, anything that's going to be simple, it's probably the one that's not going to be the most beneficial for you.
Going back into sport, is there any sort of goals for you right now that you're sort of wanting to achieve? Are you wanting to get back into CrossFit or anything like that? Or?
I do think my big thing now, just with everything that's happened, so over the first couple of months of this year, so every year I'm just this is going to be my year for XYZ, and then something happens.
Don't we all say that?
And then something happens that really changes my perspective on the year. So I think my entire perspective on what matters now, because with family and whatnot, and just how I've dedicated so much to being an athlete, two, a researcher, and a really good researcher, and just trying to climb the ranks, where I put all my time into that, and I actually missed out a lot of my time with my family. So that's been a big part of how is it that I can get my life where I can be with my family, but also do more research. So sports-wise, it is just training to, I probably missed the Raw this year, but to be able to get out and explore the country, as well as just, fishing and diving as much as I can. So being fit for that stuff, because, man, I hadn't trained for those things for a while, and I've just been doing it a lot more. And
it's a different energy system, going hunting.
Absolutely. It's that hard yakka, just go, and just when you're just man, my 5 reps, or my 10 reps, that's only the 20 seconds of this whole hike, and I got to go. So I think that's the big one right now, and it's trying to find that middle ground, which is probably, when it comes to goal setting, one of the hardest goals I've ever had to set for myself, because it's actually prioritizing my own values, which I think, we've always talked about values, always talked about, my family is my biggest value, integrity is a big value, respect. But when I actually look at where I was putting my attention, where I was spending my money,
third place,
I was those weren't even up there. So having that hard look as well. So
do you think that geographically where we are, because I have the same sort of feeling. All my whānau, I have a brother who's here, who's a police officer. But it's just him and I. That's the only whānau I have. And my wife's here. I've got a son here. But, man, I have 15 uncles and aunties, and they all live in the North Island or Australia.
Yeah.
But, man, it's very rarely we get back home. I'm way more likely to go overseas for a holiday than I am to go back home. And it's not until I see my dad, we'll pay for my dad to come down. I'm like, oh, my God. When was the last time I saw you?
Yeah.
Well, 3 years ago, but it's 8 years since you've been home.
Yeah.
And he's like, and your whānau need you, and you need this, and you need that. I'm like, oh. Shucks, he's right.
Yep.
I'm the same. Every year I'm like, this year I'm going to spend way more time with my whānau. Get to December, I was like, man, this bloody gym. And these other ideas that I had, they've sort of dominated. So it is. I do get it. It's a very, very hard sort of juggling act to kind of get it all together and get it right.
With I just looked at your podcast. I just briefly talked about this. Your podcast. You haven't done one in a wee while.
It's been a while, man.
Yeah. What's gonna happen in that space?
Yeah. So I was looking at if I was to bring content. Because this is an example of where I'm at in my life right now. And some people call this a midlife crisis, but I'm on the dumb phone at the moment.
There we go.
Yeah, so if we just so this bad boy has no apps, I'm not working. It's actually got a bit of a camera, but I probably couldn't get you to touch it on that back wall. But that's the podcast. I went off Instagram, I'm only on Facebook for the groups that I'm in. But the podcast, I don't know if you've found it yet, and actually I haven't spoken about the podcast for a very long time, but when you put stuff out to the world, because of the openness that you have, because of the stuff that you share, I think people immediately think that they're part of your world and they can ask you questions and that you're just open. So that kind of got to me a little bit, where I was just like, oh no, like some of the messages I was getting, because a lot of it is about being open, about talking about experiences, were just heavy, and I was like, I'm not a counsellor, but then you feel some sort of responsibility, because it's like, if you've given me this information, should I, like, am I meant to do something? Do I pretend it's not there? So that was also another thing where I was like, I can't also be everything to these people as well as try to be an athlete and that. But I did love podcasting. It was really, really fun. I met some of the best people through it, like a lot of gym owners, a lot of, high level footy players, high level just athletes in general. And it wasn't even about how they made it to where they are. It was just who they are as humans. And you start to see little trends in them. It's not what gym they went to, what are they doing like in between sets. It's just their daily that is so different from everyone else who's ever made it. Yeah,
and I think we've found that as well with the people that we've had on the podcast. You've got a certain sort of mindset and how they do things and philosophies and whatnot, which is just, which is interesting. And I feel like a lot of people have got that anyway, but it's good to get them on the podcast. You saying what you did before around getting messages and things like that. I spent my early years in radio, and that is one thing that you do get all the time, because radio it's always on, right? You jump in your car, the radio is always on. There's always usually someone on, especially at the graveyard shifts as well. But they all get these heavy messages on because you're opening up your life, for breakfast guys at 6 till 10 every Monday to Friday, and these guys are opening up their lives every single day, and these guys whatever, and they do get a lot of messages. So I can relate in the fact that can be quite hard, because it's probably something that you didn't think of when you signed up and you were like, okay, we're doing a podcast, okay, I want to do a podcast, I want to talk about this, whatever. One, it's quite difficult to set up everything and have the tech gear and all that sort of side of things. Me and Phil know that now. Nice. But I think it's also the other side of it is where, like, okay, you might have some fans or whatever, or people that are trying to reach out to you, and you're like, whoa, what, I was not expecting this type of message. So I can imagine that would have been quite hard for you. Yeah,
for sure. And because before starting it, so it was just before the lockdowns were hit that the first episodes went out, and before that I was kind of just doing like little snippets where I just like post up a video and just like talk about, so how you can just like questions, and then people, and I was just talking about those, and then that's when people were like, you should put this into long form and actually like discuss it deeper. So I did that, and then I think the timing of it going into lockdown, where people just craved social, like some sort of social. So having my voice, or having myself and a guest's voice in the background, was someone feeling like they're sitting in a conversation, and I think that also is like, they're my friend. Because I know so much about them, but I know, like, it's one way. I'm putting this out to you, but I can't see what your face is doing. I can't see any of that stuff, but they now feel like they have been part of that conversation. So that's, it's something, and that's, something that I'm privileged. I'm privileged that I had that opportunity to be that person for someone. And at the beginning you want to help everyone who's messaging you, and like, oh, have you? Yeah, okay, that's cool. But then when it gets to a point where it moves beyond your friend circle and beyond your friend's friend circle, so you're just getting people all over the world, I'm just like, okay, this was never meant to become this big. So now I just need to like shut off completely. But I do want to bring it back. It might be a little bit more like short, sharp segments rather than the long, drawn out stuff, but it's just, having a look at what suits me best for now. I
think it'd be cool if you can bring it back. I've listened to a couple of episodes, and it's kind of cool to highlight some different kinds of people.
I had some sick battlers on there, stuff, and they'll start, and I'm like, I think we're going to talk about one thing, and then they just bring up this like, I actually grew up in this, and you're like, that place exists?
I think that's what we've noticed, and the big reason for doing this, man, is that there are so many cool people in the gym, out in this community, doing amazing work. That, it's just like, oh, far out, I know that guy. Do you really know that guy? Because I just went to a seminar and he presented in front of 5,000 people, and then you're like, dude, did you just do a press? And humbleness. There's a lot of humbleness in the city. So it's nice to use this as a platform to sort of showcase that, or
No, that's very cool.
you get the voice out. Yeah.
Before we sort of wrap up, because
Sure.
we're getting to that time,
Yep.
what are your goals this year? What are you wanting to achieve? Might not even be this year. It could be 6 months' time. It could be a couple of years down the track.
Yeah, so currently I'm a postdoc fellow, so I'm a research fellow, but I'm also doing a research project that is a postdoc, and what that is just like a little bit of extra work that you do after your PhD, so that you can, pretty much show the world that you're ready to take on big grants on your own. So you've shown that you don't need supervisors, you can just have a couple of mentors and do your own. My big one is which would be really nice if I can do it, is to put all of the other additional stuff that I have said yes to bed, so that I can really focus on that, because that's the cool stuff that I was talking about before, where all of the data that we have, we can actually bring community voice and community narrative to it. So it's a form of content creation, but I want to be able to really dig my toes into that, but also making sure that I am in the right headspace to do it, because it does get quite heavy. So I think that's a really big thing, and it's just having my habits and my behavioural patterns and everything down, so that, because it is going to be a lot of travel around the country, it is going to be a lot of talking to like a high calibre of just people you'd never think that you'd ever speak to in your life about this sort of stuff. And then how is it that we're going to transform that to be able to be used within community? So that's my big goal, but that's actually a contract that's going to go this year, next year, and in the year after. So as I'm doing that, I'm just going to be, looking at, because probably end of this year we'll have to look at where it is that I want to go after that, because I'll be, early 30s by then, and start thinking about other things in my life, like actually kids and family and buying properties and all that sort of stuff. So just kind of dig down into all of that stuff. But then also just making sure that I've given myself time to continue getting out there. With my fishing, my hunting, my diving and all that, and just prioritising that stuff too.
No, that's cool. That's awesome.
Where do you dive?
What's that?
Where do you dive?
I'll talk to you later.
So
a lot of my diving has been in Wellington. So when I get to go back up there,
good
I'm out
spots.
there and I smash it. Just because like the Rahui down here, but also it's just cold.
Oh, it is cold.
It
is cold.
cold.
Oh, the 7 mil, man. You can use
There we
that.
go. Where you just come in and you just like can't move, but you're like, it's for the
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's awesome. Hey, Troy, it's been bloody lovely having you on the podcast today. Awesome to hear your journey. Awesome to see where you want to go, your philosophies, your mindset. It's been awesome. So, thank you very much for jumping on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Brother.
Cheers.